When you think of America, do you love America? If you don't love America, you don't love the country, I want people to take a long, hard look. If not America, then where would you go? This is a land of opportunity. This is a land of freedom. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. People today in America expect themselves to just earn six figures right out of the gate. You know, expecting this like just entitlement. In our home, we were Honduran, but God forbid we ever had to go to war against Honduras, I would be fighting for the American side.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Hey friends, cannot wait for you to check out this new episode of the CEO Show podcast where I interviewed my new friend, Galel Fajardo. And Galel is an American dream story. He's a business and mindset coach. So if you want to learn how to develop the Immigrant Edge mentality, if you want to learn about entrepreneurship and how to increase your income and impact, you're going to want to check out this episode. Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode of the CEO Show. And I have a banger today with my friend Galel. Galel, welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, brother? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So, man, I am super fired up. We connected earlier this year. We're shooting this in tail end of 2024 and just fired me up. Your mindset, your American dream family story, which is absolutely incredible. And the theme of this particular podcast is to teach leadership, promote capitalism, and defend free speech, because freedom is my core value. And there's a lot of issues with our country. There's no doubt about it. But holy smokes, man, this place is some of the one of the best places I've seen on the planet. And being 41 years young, I've experienced 40 countries, lived in 3 continents, speak 2 languages, and I'm just super grateful for the United States of America. Amen. But I would say no one probably really is more grateful from you than your family to see your family's background coming from Honduras, living the American dream, if you will. So yes. I want to give you the platform here to tell us a little bit about your first generation, but your parents came from Honduras, which is a very dangerous socialist country in Central America. So I would love for you to unpack that story, on how they came to the United States and really what that foundation looked like for you.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me here, Bryce. Super stoked to be here. As I tell people, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Those giants are my mother and father. You know, they came to the U.S. with a dream, and they had options as to where they could go potentially, and they knew that America was this land of opportunity. And so my parents, as high school students, they joined an exchange student program. They went to Missouri, of all places.
Really?
Yeah, they were there as exchange students, and then they were given scholarships. They won scholarships being top students in Honduras to study university here in the United States. So they went to Rolla, Missouri. The jobs that were in demand at that time were computers. My mom didn't have a passion for computers, but she's like, look, if I can study computers and become a U.S. citizen someday, I'll do it. And so she kind of put her dreams aside just to like pursue a career, because at that time you had to apply based upon what you were going to study. Mm-hmm. Well, my parents got married when my mom was 17. My dad was 20, I believe. And my mom at 18 was pregnant. Oh, wow. And so here they were. With me. And to add a little wrench into the whole thing, their scholarship money was embezzled in Honduras and stolen. So they were told, okay, Galel and Anna, you can come back to Honduras, or if you choose to stay in the U.S., you're going to have to fend for yourself. And so being the badasses that they are, they said, we're going to stay and fend for ourselves, and proceeded to go on. My mom dropped out of college to take care of me full time. She was afraid she didn't speak the language very well, didn't know anybody. And she's like, I'm not going to trust a stranger with my child. So she was the primary caretaker. And my dad went on to being a full-time college student. He was washing dishes in a Chinese restaurant while at the same time working as the handyman for the apartment building that we lived in so that he could get reduced rent. And he may have exaggerated his skill set when he told the landlord that he could do that. There's a story that I'll pass along about that, about his resourcefulness.
Please.
And then also he was working at the library, in the computer lab during his other times as well. So he was basically working 3 jobs while being a full-time student and having to be a husband and a father. So it was wild for them. There was not enough money for them, that's for sure. They got into massive amounts of debt at one point. And again, they did a great job of insulating me from, as I grew up, I didn't know I was poor growing up. They didn't say that. In hindsight, I look back and go, oh yeah, we were poor growing up. And my parents really emphasized for us this notion of working hard and gratitude, being grateful for living in the United States. And that was one of the major lessons that I've learned watching their example growing up. And so they just busted their asses from day one here in the U.S.
Dude, man, that just fires me up so much. And, a lot of times, especially in today's day and age, you have, the young generation who comes out very entitled. They have their iPhones and all that.
Yeah.
And, and to be fair, sometimes it's not their fault. They've just been sheltered by their, society, this, that, and the other. But you're just really lacking the resourcefulness, was the word that you just used. And I lived in South America for 2 years, and Brazil specifically. And there's the English translation is the Brazilian way. But really what it means is with a lack of resources, you must be resourceful. So Galel, from your perspective, how were your parents resourceful? Like, what were some of the things that you see? I think you said you want to tee up a story. So I wrote down in my notes resourcefulness, because that's just a foundational principle of that immigrant edge we'll talk about. And also entrepreneurship, which is, again, what the theme of this show is.
Yeah.
So continue on.
So one of the big lessons that both my parents taught me is sometimes, Galel, you just have to figure it out.
FIO.
Right?
Yeah.
You just have to figure it out. And so, for example, when my dad was working as the handyman, he kind of exaggerated his skill set. And he said, son, there was days, this was before the internet, before YouTube, and there was a problem that I had to fix. So I had to figure out how I was going to do it. And so he would go to the library, he would pull up books. Again, this is before the internet, right? Pull up books, see how the repair is made, and then he would have to go shut off the power main and make sure he's doing this electrical work for the first time.
And his English isn't probably fantastic
Correct.
either. So he's having to learn that while doing all these other things.
Yeah. My favorite one was where he told me about how he had to hire a plumber one time. He had to pay for it out of his own pocket. So he didn't have money, but here he was having to shell out money for a plumber because he needed to learn how it was done. And so he said he's sitting there watching the plumber work with a notebook, and he's taking notes as to all the tools he's using and what he's doing step by step. And the plumber's kind of looking over his shoulder going like, what's going on? He's like, oh, no, nothing. Just here hanging out, But that's what my dad had to do, to invest in somebody else's expertise so he could learn it, so he could fix it the next time a problem came up. Yeah. Right. And then stuff like that, too, as crazy as having to pawn a 13-inch black and white television set to feed me, and I get a little choked up when I think about my parents and that they were in that situation, so desperate to feed me that they literally would pawn their only TV set so that they could feed me. It's sacrifice, it's resourcefulness, figuring it out. And there's just story upon story upon story that they've shared with me over the years now as to when they've had to become resourceful.
How do you think that shaped you in your upbringing, like seeing your parents sacrifice? Because I think when you take a step back, leadership is about sacrifice. Entrepreneurship is about sacrifice. Being a parent is about sacrifice. In your family situation, escaping, having nothing, showing up to this country, but with strong work ethic, with a not entitlement attitude, which is I just love so much. How did that shape you, and how have you taken that, in your entrepreneur journey, and also to your parent as well?
Well, it was something where often growing up, because, I was born in the U.S. and I would hang out with other Americans and be hanging out with other kids that would kind of rub off their entitlement on me sometimes, rub off a little bit. Yeah. And I would start to say, well, why is it that I don't have a Nintendo and all my friends have a Nintendo? Why do we live in an apartment and my friends live in a house type thing? And my parents would very quickly bring me back down to earth and say, son, we think you need to remember a little bit about where you came from.
Ooh.
And they said, we understand and we live in the United States of America, but in this home, there are certain values that we're going to abide by. And one of those is going to be respect, and respect for your culture and where you come from, And so it was that respect of knowing my roots, that my parents would never let me forget my roots, and that we were to assimilate to America, right? But in our home, we were Honduran. But God forbid we ever had to go to war against Honduras, I would be fighting for the American side. This is our country, but in our home, we have our culture. And in our culture, we work hard. We don't blame anybody but ourselves, and we take action ourselves. We do not blame other people. If it's up to be, it's up to me. So, get your ass in gear, Mr. Fajardo. Like,
dude, man, that's just the like perfect combination of everything. Because I like the ability to like maintain the culture in the household and like honoring, respecting that as well, but not having that entitled mindset and realizing, hey, we're in a different country, and this country has provided opportunity, but it's the American dream. It's not the American guarantee.
Right.
No one's coming here on a white horse to save us. Like, these are the two hands that we have. It's up to us to save ourselves. And you can just feel that. Like, literally, when I had this conversation with you earlier in this year, I was like, I could sense it. I could feel that. It inspired me so much. I'm going to go on a rant here. And again, like, there's a lot of times where it's not the fault of the younger generation, but it's this entitled approach.
Right.
It's this, like, the essence of prosperity. And I grew up playing sports. The hardest time to win a national championship is just after you won a national championship, because you get complacent.
Yes.
And I think, you know, in our society, we've gotten complacent. We've had a lot of winning and we have a lot of prosperity.
Very much.
And it's about bringing it down to the roots. And I guess the last thing on that before I flip it back to you would be, I had a very similar experience, but the opposite way. I grew up very humble beginnings for first world standards, but for first world standards. And my message here is never confuse first world standards for third world standards.
Yeah.
And I learned that message, or I learned that lesson when I was 25 years old. And for the first time, I visited Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which is this beautifully magical place, right? It's right perched on the Atlantic Ocean, has the mountains. It's just this amazing culture. But for the first time, I saw poverty. I saw kids like playing without clothes, without shoes. Yeah. And, you know, taking a step back, my father was a drug addict, addicted to alcohol and gambling. It created a very volatile, experience growing up. But to see poverty firsthand, it was this like wake up call, kind of like what you just said about, you know, hey, well, I don't have all the Nintendo. It's like, no, Bryce, like, get your ass in shape and realize, like, you know, you have it good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about work ethic and really being empathetic towards others in really challenging situations. So.
Gosh, one of the best things that my parents ever did was send me and my sister to Honduras for the summer. And they would do this regularly as kids.
To visit family. So at the time, my grandma was still working. Yep. Now my grandma's here. She's a U.S. citizen and she is a patriot. I mean, my grandmother is an American patriot. But at the time, we were living with my grandma for a month and a half at a time. And that is like walking the streets, riding the buses, riding the taxi cabs, and seeing real life in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, right? Experiencing that life was an eye-opener. And, you know, my mom sent me a very poignant text message a couple years ago. They were flying back from Honduras, and she said, you know, Galel, there is nothing to me that brings me more joy and brings tears to my eyes than when we land and see the flag of the United States of America. I want to get out of the plane and I want to kiss the ground because I'm so proud of where my new home is, you know, and it's that attitude that is missing in a lot of people. A lot of people that grew up here take this for granted. Oh, yeah.
And it pisses me off, Bryce.
Yeah.
The fact that there are people who walk around going, man, I can't stand America. I hate America. I'm like, then go to Honduras.
Yeah.
Go live in Mexico.
We'll
go live in
Venezuela
Cuba
for a little bit.
Go to Venezuela. Yeah. Because guess what? They're not flooding the border by the thousands because it's really awesome where they live.
Amen.
Right. And, you know, there's a reason why men and women sacrifice their lives on floating rafts to come from Cuba. You know, this is a land of opportunity. This is a land of freedom. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Do our leaders make mistakes? Yes, they do. Yeah. Right? Has been very evidenced over the last few years in America.
Yeah. I mean, truth be told, I mean, I'm disappointed with a lot of things I've seen in our country for
absolutely,
sure. Absolutely. But just you can be disappointed, but that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
It's a lack of perspective, my friend.
Correct.
So kind of diving into that, speaking about the American dream, when I look at the economic system for freedom and prosperity, right? Yep. And one of the reasons I rebranded my show, and we were just talking off, and there's a lot of reasons for it as well, but the second pillar that I want to start teaching is promoting capitalism. And for whatever reason, at least from my perspective, over the last handful of years in the media, specifically at universities, like the word capitalism is getting a bad name. Yeah. Like socialistic, even communist type ideologies.
Right.
I just saw a study that Valuetainment Petra Bet-David put out, and like a third of our college students graduating have favorable ideas on communism.
Yes.
That's just a crazy lack of perspective for me.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, like, what are your thoughts on capitalism? And not only your thoughts, I'm curious if you can storytell a little about your parents, especially coming from a more socialistic environment in Honduras.
Yeah. So, capitalism is not perfect. As with anything, you're going to have flaws. You're going to have extreme examples that you're going to see throughout history, throughout society. But capitalism drives people to become better, right?
Why?
Because competition forces you to innovate. It forces you to increase your skill set. Capitalism, so the marketplace is just value in exchange for your value.
Yes.
If you are not getting enough value, well then guess what? You better find a way to increase your value. Make yourself irreplaceable. And so that was one of the things that my parents taught me growing up was, Galel, if you want to secure yourself in whatever career it is you choose, because they supported me in whatever I wanted. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. They're like, great, go be a great professional baseball player. Then I wanted to, be a police officer. And then I wanted to do all these other things, right? But they're like, go be the best that you can be and make yourself invaluable. People today in America expect themselves to just earn six figures right out of the gate. I've hired for positions, and a position that would, hire for $50,000 a year, I'm getting people out of college, I want $100,000 a year, expecting this like just entitlement, like with no experience, nothing. And so one of the examples that I had about capitalism, one of the rough parts of capitalism is, guess what? Sometimes businesses go out of business. So my dad shows up at this point. He's making probably about $30-something thousand a year. And he was, the main guy, title of the CEO for this software company. He shows up on a Friday and he's, about half the day has gone by and he's like, my paycheck hasn't arrived. So he goes and he says, hey, what's going on? The owner of the company calls him and says, Galel, there's no money. Like, there's no money, so I can't pay you. He's like, what do you mean there's no money? You can't pay me. I got to go pay rent like today, right? He's like, there's no money. Doors are closed today. So literally the boss or the owner of the company gave my dad all this computer equipment, said, you can take all this in lieu of payment and you're going to have to figure it out. So the first thing that my dad does is he goes to our apartment complex and asks to speak to the manager and says to the manager, listen, I am so sorry, but this is what's happened. And I want to let you know I have full intent to pay you, but I just have to get things figured out on my end. They said, Mr. Fajardo, you've been on time with your rent every single month that you've lived here. We'll give you an extra week with no penalty. He said, great.
By the way, just like good leadership, man. I mean, shit hits the fan, unfortunate situation, but man's up, has a conversation. This is what happened.
Yes.
I'll make it right here. Like, that's just strong leadership.
Big time. So
continue on.
So he sets that straight. And then he proceeds to drive from, so a lot of people won't know the geography if they're listening to this outside of where we are, but you'll know the geography. So the company's in Costa Mesa inside of, coastal Orange County. Yep. In one day, he drives to downtown Los Angeles, Hollywood, all the way out to Riverside, California, down to La Jolla, California, before driving back home and getting home late at night. So it's like an hour and a half drive one way, a 2-hour drive another. I mean, he's home by like 10 o'clock at night.
Well, I want to interject and actually provide some context, because that's not just like an hour and a half drive. The traffic in Southern California, I mean, to go to Orange County to downtown LA, it's only probably about 50 miles where the bird flies, or the crow flies, as the saying goes. But like the amount of density, traffic you have to get through, and then to La Jolla, like all the way to San Diego, that's a voyage, man.
One giant loop that he went. So it might have been, 10 o'clock in the morning when he realizes, okay, the shit's hit the fan here at work. I got to go and figure this out. So this software company was servicing this software for money managers. Okay. So he went to the main clients and said, here's what's happened. That company is now out of business, but I will now service your account moving forward. Instead of writing the checks to this company, you're going to write the checks to me. And so in order to continue to service you, I'm going to set up a deposit for my consulting fee. Here's my rate. Here's my service. Do you wish to work with me? They said, absolutely. They wrote him a check. Each place he went to, he collected checks as deposits. And so he started the day with no money, no prospects. went out and hustled, talking to these different companies, got retainers from them, and then he came home with enough money to be able to pay for their bills for the next couple of months. So that right there, when he told me that story, and he saved that story for years. I mean, it wasn't until I was in college that I heard that story. My level of respect for what my mom and dad went through just went through the roof.
Yeah, of
that
course.
they managed to insulate me from this stuff, right? That they were sweating it out, you know, behind closed doors going, how the hell are we going to pay these bills? But man, they went out, they made it happen. All throughout this time, my mom is, you know, going back to college to become a doctor. So when my sister and I started, you know, in kindergarten and first grade, my mom went back to school, became a doctor. My mom, literally my wife graduated high school the same year my mom graduated medical school. And so my mom has, you know, since grew a medical practice and, you know, became a successful doctor. All this after having gone through all this craziness leading up to that point. There's just incredible examples of hard work.
Dude, man, I love that. The word or the phrase that comes to mind is the immigrant edge.
Big time.
And it's interesting, you know, on one hand, if you're an immigrant, you are underneath massive underprivilege or disadvantage, I guess is what
Yes.
you're saying in one way.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn the language. It's a foreign culture. I mean, there's a lot of adversity stacked against you.
Yes.
But as my leadership philosophy and as the tagline of this podcast, adversity is your advantage. So it's interestingly enough, and you don't see it all the time, but you see most of the times, good-hearted immigrants that come to the country, they have this immigrant edge.
Yes.
This immigrant edge, which on one hand is a disadvantage, but on the other hand, with proper focus and energy, it becomes this massive advantage.
Big time.
So unpack that a little bit. Like, do you see that in your parents? Do you see that in the family and the culture? What does that look like to you?
So I'm gonna get a little like spiritual on you here.
Please.
Okay. So I'm a Christian. So for me, I wholeheartedly believe that God has allowed me and my family to go through difficult times in our lives for multiple reasons. Not as a form of punishment, not as like you were bad, so you're gonna struggle, but it's that I see how your life is going to end up one day, and these struggles are going to equip you to equip others.
Yep.
And so since that, I've watched my mother emerge as an inspiration to Latino women, because she went back to school not knowing the language well, not knowing many people, and she became a doctor, a freaking doctor, right? My father ended up, you know, working in a Chinese restaurant, getting yelled at by this boss of his, and, you know, that somebody who didn't treat him well, and, you know, was the handyman for the apartment complex, and working in the library, and working these small piddly jobs until he grew his own six-figure business, then ultimately became a chief information officer for an investment bank. Watching their stories and how they have inspired people along the way, Latinos and non-Latinos alike, but then also watching my parents pay it forward, where I've had men stop me out in the street and say, "You're Galel Fajardo Jr., aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You know, I went to church with your father and I was in a really rough place, and your father inspired me, and he actually paid for my education to go learn this certification. And so now I'm working in software because of your father's inspiration." Another good friend of ours has grown to now have a multiple six-figure technology business. He was driving a bread truck. You know, Felipe was driving a bread truck. He was one of my first mortgage clients when I owned a mortgage company, and I was helping him buy his second home because my dad saw him, you know, wheeling bread, and he said, "Well, do you like your job?" He's like, "No, I hate it." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you go get MCSE certified, I'll give you a job at $75 an hour." Well, he did it. And he worked for my dad for many years and now has a great business in technology. And so I've seen my mom and dad time and again pay it forward. And that to me left a big impression on me, that as the capitalists that we are, as the entrepreneurs that we are, it's a responsibility on us to pay it forward and to be somebody that helps. Be a helper. Don't be somebody that just points out all the flaws that happen. Go out. What are you doing to go and help? And contribute 100%, contribute. And so that left a real lasting impact as to they recognized that they got to where they were by relying on folks to give them, you know, my aunt, I remember, gave my dad a place to stay while he was looking for jobs. Like, I thank God for my aunt and the help that she provided my dad with meals so that he didn't have to fight for a hotel room, right? The landlord who gave my dad a break when we didn't have the rent in time. Just story after story after story where I view it as God showing up in the form of other people. And it's just a reminder that we each have a role to play in society and in life, helping out other people and paying it forward.
Yeah, I think good leadership on the other side of leadership is responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So that just really resonates with me. In terms of a leadership perspective, like I just can't help but be so inspired to hear that story. And especially, I'm going to go back, and I don't like to talk in absolutes because there's a lot of grateful kids out there, but especially in today's youth, when we think we're entitled because we don't have the latest iPhone, this, that, and the other. And then you hear a story like your parents and your father and your mother, what they've done. It's just, I have massive amounts of respect for that. So when I'm hearing this, and I guess to our audience right here, that's the immigrant edge. That's the fire in the belly, the figure it out mentality, the pay it forward, the responsibility to serve humanity. If someone doesn't come from that background, maybe they're third, fourth, fifth generation America, they've literally felt all this prosperity. How do you install that immigrant edge, that hustle, that work ethic? If someone's listening to right now, how do they do that?
That's a great question. I think they need to, first off, realize that when they turn on the news and they see our border getting flooded by people coming here, there's a reason for that.
There is a reason.
Right? First off, I mean, let's talk about the lack of leadership into protecting our borders. That's a different episode.
That's a whole other conversation, but I think it's important we address that.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that infuriates my family, by the way, because there was a massive sacrifice to come to this country and a process that was very lengthy and costly. And there was long time before they become U.S. citizens, right? They came to this country in 1980, became citizens in 1995. 15 years of working and paying taxes for them to earn that citizenship.
And thank God they came.
Oh gosh, I mean, like I don't know what my life would be like if they hadn't, right? I wouldn't have met my beautiful wife, and I wouldn't have the life I have today if they hadn't made that sacrifice. But for those of the people that are listening to this, I want them to take a long, hard look at themselves and think about and reflect upon: are they truly grateful for where they live? When you think of America, do you love America? I think that's a really important question to ask themselves, because if you don't love America, you don't love the country. And again, I'm not saying to love something means it's perfect.
No.
My wife loves me, and I am as flawed a human as you could imagine. I'm not perfect.
Yeah, neither
right?
of us are.
We've made mistakes in life. But to love something doesn't mean it has to be perfect. But I want people to take a long, hard look. If not America, then where would you go? And so I think it starts with that, recognizing, do you love where you live? And do you love this place? And then, quite frankly, I think they need to lean into some of these immigrant stories.
Yeah.
Read about Bedros Keuilian.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories that he's told about having his hair washed with gasoline to get rid of lice, what life was like in the Soviet Union and how the things that his parents had to do to be able to escape that communism. I mean, become educated.
Listen to this podcast, which you are, but share this podcast as well.
Absolutely.
This is an American dream story, man, which I'm fired up, and it's a theme of this particular podcast. I want to show people that whether you have the immigrant edge story or not, but you can make it something with hard work and dedication.
100%.
Continue on.
No. And so also understanding and being self-aware, okay? Am I coming from an entitlement mentality? Right? I think this entitlement mentality, it infects. It's like a cancer. It starts in one place and then it spreads all throughout. And so I'm going to encourage people to recognize when that entitlement shows up in their life. Entrepreneurs, you and I have coached and worked with many entrepreneurs over the years, right? And we have this notion of like, well, I've been working hard. Why am I not successful yet? Or why did this happen? Or we complain. Check yourself. Check your attitude. Where is this coming from, right? And so I would encourage people that as soon as that creeps in, recognize it and squash it, because entitlement, feeling like a victim, is not going to serve you.
It feels good in the second. You think it's euphoria,
Right.
but it's a disaster of a situation and leave your life crippled.
Yes. Yes, because as soon as you start feeling like a victim means that there's nothing within your control. You are the victim of circumstances. BS. There are stories after stories after stories of people that have had it much more difficult than you have, that have risen above and succeeded, right? Go and start reading biographies. If you think your life sucks, go read a biography about Abraham Lincoln and tell me about, living through the Civil War and dealing with depression and dealing with anxiety and dealing with all the things that he had to deal with in his life and how he was able to make something of his life.
Viktor Frankl, who our dear friend Craig Ballantyne introduced the book Man's Search for Meaning. This guy was in a Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz for years, man, and the trials and tribulations he went through. The exact opposite of victim mentality. Literally, he took it upon himself. He's like, happiness is within me. Like, crazy to think about that. So just validating your point.
No, and that's another book right there. Yeah, Viktor Frankl is just, it's so powerful that, human history teaches us that there's evil in the world. If you are thinking that there does not exist good and evil, I hate to break it to you, but it's a fact.
It is, yeah.
Good and evil exist in this world. We're seeing it alive and well today with the way that society goes after children and the horrible news and things that we're hearing about what's going on. And so, but Viktor Frankl, with as horrible the things that happened with him, turning it around and influencing millions of lives after that. What could you do in your neighborhood with your story? How could you inspire somebody by choosing not to be a victim and instead be proactive into changing things, changing your life, making things happen?
Well, man, you fire me up. Your story fires me up. Your family fires me up.
Thanks, bro.
And I wanted to be able to provide, I guess, the foundational part of this interview, just to talk a little bit of the backstory, shine some light in the American dream, realizing the fact that this country is not perfect, but holy smokes, man, the American dream is alive and well. For those who accept responsibility for themselves, do not be a victim of circumstances, rather be a champion, if you will.
Amen.
So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for letting me talk about people that I love tremendously.
Oh yeah. So the second part of the conversation, to kind of transition, I want to talk a little bit about transition, I guess identity, performance, mindset, legacy, and impact. So interestingly, man, you have a storied career starting in politics. We were talking offline, then going to mortgages, digital marketing agency, and now you're a high performance coach with both of our dear friends, Craig Ballantyne's team. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how have you managed that then transition points in your career, and really from an identity perspective? And the reason I ask this is our audience, they're interested in creating a life of impact and income. They know where they're at right now. They're listening to this because they're not satisfied. They're not fulfilled. They want to create something for themselves, whether it be a fitness business or something that's going to give them freedom, but also add value. So, the path they're on is a path of identity shift and change. So how have you managed that from politics to digital marketing to, now being a high performance coach?
So I would not be a high performance coach today if I had not experienced a major business failure in 2007, 2008 during the mortgage industry.
I would love for you to tell us. I'm thinking you're going to allude to that, because the reason I want to interject there is because there's a lot of value in learning lessons from all the wins, but I think a lot of times the biggest lessons come from the losses. So continue on.
Well, and this is a reminder too, is that when people go on social media and they see pictures and videos of me with my family and taking awesome vacations and seeing pictures of me and my wife in London and, Lake Tahoe and going to all these great trips with our family, they're watching the highlight reels today. But what they didn't see were the tears. They didn't see the brokenness, the struggle of what happened years before that. I'm just simply now reaping the rewards of those lessons. And so I don't want people to gloss over what you said, that yes, it's important to know the wins, but also the losses teach you so many things. The reason I am a coach is because in 2007, 2008, my wife and I owned a mortgage company. And I focused on big loans, working in Costa Mesa, Newport Beach. And all of a sudden, I couldn't lend money anymore. And so when I couldn't lend money, I couldn't make money. And so I was dipping into savings and investments, and I'm paying the bills out of my savings account, and money's running out, dwindling to the point where I'm like, Emily, I don't know how we're going to make our mortgage payment next month. And I kept thinking that I was going to be able to make it, and that money never came. And during that time, I had like two major things that were happening. So my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I was penniless. And not only was I broke, I was broken. Man. I began to succumb to the temptations that exist in life when things aren't going well. We have like default behaviors that we fall down to. So it was excess consumption of food, alcohol, pornography, just, envy, complaining. All those are addictions, right?
And if you're listening to this is human nature. This is the good side and the bad side. We've all felt those. We've all gone through this.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk in absolutes, but you can resonate. You're hearing this right now, so continue on.
So in that, during this cycle, I start dealing with severe panic attacks, anxiety, depression, and I was a shell of myself. And at that point, my life became a math problem. And I know that there are some men that this will resonate with. Sorry, this is just, I'm feeling it.
That's great.
At that time, I said, Emily must have made a mistake because I'm broken. I can't make money anymore. My identity was as an entrepreneur. And so it is either my life ends and she gets this life insurance and she can pay all my debts and start over with a man who's not broken, or is she going to stick around? And during that time, I realized, first off, the importance of family. So my mom's a physician, and so she came alongside me and said, listen, I want you to talk to this doctor friend of mine to see if there's anything that we can do to help you out with what's going on. I have a therapist who I started working with to help me with the panic, the depression, the anxiety, and my wife was just a huge support in the fact that she's like, Galel, I don't love you for your money. When I married you, you were a broke college student, for goodness sakes. I didn't marry you because of money, and we're going to get through this.
What a
and
gal.
So and I saw so many men during that period get divorced because their wives said, well, you're no longer earning, I'm out. Times got tough and they left. And during that time period, she showed me what she was made of. She was still willing to look at me as the leader of our home, still willing to pump me up with truth. And so it kept me going. Yeah. And our beautiful baby boy was born, and I was hoping and praying that they weren't going to give me the bill on the spot, and they didn't, thankfully. And then just continually like having my parents in my corner, reminding me of the fact that, son, we work through difficult circumstances. This too shall pass. Children are a blessing from God. And just watch. Things are going to turn around when you have your child. Children are a blessing. Good things are going to happen. And good things started to happen. But I had to redefine myself. And so I was no longer a mortgage guy. I didn't want to go back to that industry. And I said, well, I love marketing. So guess what? I'm now a digital marketing consultant. And so I just literally said, I'm a digital marketing consultant.
You shifted your identity.
Shifted my identity, like increased some skill set, and got my first job as a digital marketer. Then over time started doing consulting, but I found this like deep yearning inside me that I wanted to make a bigger impact on people. And so I was working a job doing digital marketing. I wasn't super happy. And I said to my wife, I'd actually done a one-day mastermind with Bedros and Craig down in Costa Mesa.
What year is this roughly?
Gosh, I want to say this is around 2012, maybe 2013, maybe. Cool. And I said, I think I want to become a coach because I've lived some real crazy experiences, and I think I could help other people avoid the same pain and suffering I did. That was the message that I got from going through such pain, was that now, Galel, I've equipped you with this. I felt like God speaking to me. I've equipped you with this experience so that you can go out and help other people not feel the same way, because I promise you, Galel, there's other men and women that feel that way. So I got the crazy idea to go to grad school. I eventually went, starting in 2015, 2016, National University, got a master's degree in performance psychology.
Good for you.
And that way I could apply the performance psychology world into business. And that's when my coaching career started. And that's where I'm at today. Just a jumble of mistakes and misfortunes and things that happen, but it all helped shape who I am today. And that's why we're here across from each other, is because of those tough times.
So grateful for that. And never fun to hear you have to go through that challenge, but really that's what makes us stronger. Adversity is your advantage, which is my leadership framework and the tagline to this show.
Yeah.
It's interesting also as well as, you talked about wanting to be a coach, be able to give back and be able to provide guidance and support because you went through that pain.
Yes.
And I felt that way, through my fitness journey back in 2005, 2006, before I started, become fit. I was overweight, out of shape. And I can't say that I was morbidly obese, but I was not confident. I didn't have the energy, enthusiasm. Yeah. And actually, the craziest story, one of my buddies, and we all are very impressionable with this social pressure. We're like in my early 20s, and we're a bunch of girls there at a pool party. And he's like, Bryce, it looks like you have islands for nipples. And I still don't even know what he means at this moment. I think he meant I have an undeveloped chest, but it was the most painful, embarrassing thing. It sounds so trivial in the moment, but that for me, Galel, was like the moment where I was like, you know what? I need to change this, which eventually led to me, coaching fitness and mindset, because that's the gift I can give through the pain that I went through, which is similar to your story as well.
Yes. There's a line that Bedros said a few years ago that was the linchpin for me to take my health more seriously. So I've been on a health journey like the last 2.5 years or so, right? Where now, going into my 40s, I realized, wow, health is really important.
Oh, yeah.
All this that I put on the back burner, because I was never a health and fitness guy. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to work. Well, guess what? If you're going to work at your best, you better be in good physical shape. There's one line that Bedros said. He said, your body is your resume. When he said that, I went, holy crap, I need to change.
My resume's out of whack.
My resume is way out of whack. How am I going to have people entrust me with their multi-million-dollar businesses if I can't trust myself to have good habits and be disciplined? And so that sentence right there was a linchpin for me, just as your friend talked about your nipples there that one day, right?
Well, dude, man, we all have the aha, and glad we took action against it.
Yeah, big time.
So, Galel, the last kind of part about this, being a performance coach, is really coaching mindset, right? And we know this is true. It's so critically important to business, to life, to entrepreneurship. So what are the things that you see, or how do you coach mindset? And if you're listening to this right now, our audience that, they want to be an aspiring entrepreneur, they want to open their own business, they want to have a bigger, impact on this particular planet, you have to have a strong mindset to do that. So what does that mean to you? And what are some strategies if someone's listening to this and is like, you know what, my resume, my mindset is out of whack. How do I improve this? What are some strategies that you coach against?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm going to throw out, a term that I learned in grad school called locus of control. Okay, locus of control. What are you focusing on? Are you focusing externally or are you focusing internally? So to put this in sports analogies, right? I'm a baseball guy, okay? And I officiate baseball. And so you'll have some teams where they lose a baseball game and it's like, well, we lost because it was windy today. The umpire sucked. The other team was stacked against us. And it was all everybody else's fault. It wasn't the team's fault. It wasn't the fact that they, didn't swing on 2 strikes. They didn't take the extra base when they could. All the things they could have controlled. No, they're focusing externally. So number one is when I'm working with an entrepreneur is I want to know what their locus of control is. What are they focused on? Is it feeling entitled that, hey, I should be getting the success I have, but it's my competitor's fault that I'm not doing well enough. It's this person and that person, and it's this, and they're just pointing the finger everywhere.
The blame game,
blame game, right? And not taking personal responsibility. And so I would tell people mindset-wise, first and foremost, is become very self-aware. If you can become very self-aware, you are halfway there. Because when you're self-aware, that right there is I don't have to point things out to you as a leader. If you're self-aware, you go, man, Galel, I can't retain my talent. It's hit me. I've hired 10 people and they've all quit within 6 months. Cool. Now I don't have to tell you you're a crappy leader. You know you're a crappy leader. How do we change that, right? And so it's that awareness of stop watching other people's highlight reels on social media, focus on yourself and compete against yourself. So that's one major thing. The second thing is we still have people that are programmed to be afraid of failure. And just fear in general, right? They're afraid to create content. They're afraid to put themselves out there. They're afraid of ruffling people's feathers, right? And the thing is, like, that's what you've got to do. You have to. If you want to separate yourself, you got to do the damn thing.
Literally, Galel, on a podcast episode that just launched last week, on this particular show is absolutely fire. Tons of comments, really valuable. One guy's like, it was painful to watch that episode. But you know what? That's just part of putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
You're going to hit criticism. You're going to feel that. But you got to keep pushing forward. There's no way you're going to find huge success unless you can't battle through hard criticism.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's recognizing. So like with that self-awareness, then you realize, why is it that I'm not doing these things? And what I find is people do avoidance behaviors. And so instead of sitting down to make sales calls, the salesperson will look at their desk and go, I need to go to Staples and organize my desk. Okay. You know what? I need to alphabetize this spreadsheet. And they just do so many things to avoid doing the damn thing.
Yep.
And so that self-awareness is number one. Number two, recognizing when they have fear and just acting in the face of fear.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third thing I would say it's super important mindset wise is developing proper habits. The way that I look at things, the analogies that I use when I coach people is you and I, we're born with a default hardware, right? And every day, week, month, quarter, year, we are upgrading that hardware, hopefully going from Galel and Bryce 1.0 version to the 1.1 version to the 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. And when tough times happen, we tend to revert back to a default.
Yes.
As I shared with you that I started eating too much and doing things that really didn't serve me. And so by setting yourself up with the right habits and behaviors and standards for your life, when times get tough, you're going to go to that default. And so it's constantly upgrading your hardware so that when tough times happen, you're self-aware enough to recognize it. Then you go and your default has you held up, right? Because you have the right rituals, the right habits, the right standards for your life. So that way you're not succumbing to the negative stuff. And if you have that, that's a winning combination.
Oh, love that. All right. So much value, Galel. As we kind of round down, a lot of this particular podcast submission is about legacy. It's about really leaving your family, your community, way better off than you found them. So, in your business, in your coaching business, and in your legacy as well, like, what do you want to be known for? What's the legacy that Galel is trying to leave on this planet?
For most of my life, my legacy was all about what are other people going to say about me someday. Right? I would think about the eulogy and what is somebody going to say over my casket one day when God punches my library card, sends me home. But that's changed over time. I think the most important thing that I would hope that anybody says, it's three people in my life. It's my wife, Emily, my son, Marco, and my daughter, Olivia. And that is that when times were tough, I showed them love. That they saw me as a good example as to what a life should be lived like, what a father should look like to my daughter, what a man should treat her like when she gets married someday, that I loved their mom well, and that when we had conflict that we resolved it quickly, and that I treated her with respect, that when times were tough, we leaned into each other versus pulling apart from each other, that we showed them how to manage conflict, and that we were a great example to them for their lives and their generation. I care more so about what my kids and my wife think than I think about everybody else. But also, it would be nice if people would look at me and they hear my name and they think, gosh, that guy really helped me when I was down. I was in a time of need and he gave me an encouraging word. There was a coaching session I remember that turned me around, that helped improve my marriage, that helped improve my business. And that had a trickle down effect on many other lives as a result of it. that stuff is great. I care more so about my wife and children, that I've been a good example for them and that they're proud of who I was to them during good times and also the not so good times.
Well said, my friend. That's a life well lived. So as we wrap down, I have a little bit of time for the bonus round if you're up for it.
Let's do it.
And then we'll finish off my last question. So bonus round, kind of short and punchy. What does freedom mean to you, Galel?
Freedom means being able to live where I want, say what I want, do what I want, when I want. That to me is freedom. That's America. And the internet has made it so much easier. Our life is a result of that. We homeschool our kids.
Great
if we
move,
wanted
by
to
the way. Great move.
Huge move, right? And people look at us like we're crazy.
Yeah, I would say you're
and
crazy.
You're crazy for letting the state of California teach your children, but God bless you, it's your decision.
Amen to both perspectives, 100%.
Yeah, so for me, that's what freedom is.
Love it. Who's your biggest hero? And the other side, who's your biggest enemy?
My biggest hero would have to be my grandma Cecilia. She turns 85, and it's becoming more and more evident that we're not going to be around forever. And so I cherish the moments I have with her. She is my number one fan in life. Emily is like right behind my grandma, but my grandma just is like, Galel, you are constantly in my prayers. I'm so proud of you. She doesn't really fully even know what I do for a living, I don't think, but she's just so proud of me. And the fact that she held fast in Honduras, my grandfather wasn't the greatest to her. And so she made a really tough decision to get divorced at the age that she did in her 40s, and kept my mom and my uncles going, supporting their dreams. Came to the U.S. to help us when I was a kid. My mom was going through medical school. Grandma Cecilia, man, she is awesome.
Oh, man. What about your biggest enemy?
My biggest enemy is complacency. You don't want to become comfortable. When people tell me that they just want to be comfortable, I warn them that that's a bad thing. Yeah. When you become complacent in your marriage, bad things happen. When you become complacent with your faith, bad things happen. When you become complacent in your business, in any aspect of life, that is what I am constantly trying to make sure that I stay away from, is complacency.
Oh, I love that. There's a company I'm sure you're probably fully aware, Fuel Hunt, which I'm an investor in.
This shirt is a Fuel Hunt.
Look at that. Look at that.
They made the shirt for our mastermind event in Miami, and it has two of my favorite sayings from Mr. Craig Ballantyne and Bedros.
Success loves speed, delay kills dreams.
That's right.
Another awesome Fuel Hunt shirt, which I just love the ethos of the company. Two dear friends who own it. It says, average is the enemy.
Yes.
And you just said it in a different way, which
Yes.
So true.
Yes.
All right. Second to last question. You're a performance coach. You're a mindset coach. You're a great coach at that. Your business is giving coaching advice. On the flip side, Galel, what's the best coaching advice you've ever received and why?
The best coaching advice I've ever received is, Galel, don't be afraid to ask for help. We, as coaches, oftentimes feel like we need to have all the answers. We better have it all put together. But guess what? We're human beings. Yeah. We're imperfect human beings helping out other imperfect human beings, trying to live our best lives. And recently, I had hit some challenges in business, and Craig Ballantyne, our friend and one of my mentors, said, "Why didn't you just ask me for help?" And I went, well, I think because I was prideful, And so it's been a huge lesson for me over the past couple years as I've been working closely with Craig, where I have seen him ask other people for help. I've seen him ask me for help. And it's been this constant reminder of, guess what? It's okay to help, and people will move mountains to help you. So just ask. That right there is one thing that I hope everybody implements. Ask for help.
Love that. All right, my dude, this has been an awesome show. Appreciate you. The name of the podcast is the CEO Show, the Chief Executive Officer Show. Galel, what does it mean to you to be a CEO?
To be a CEO means that the buck stops with you. You are the person who Everything rises and falls with leadership, as John Maxwell says. And so it is your responsibility that if you want your company to grow, your mindset has to grow, your skill set has to grow. But beyond that, you have to empower great people around you that are more talented than you so that they can thrive in their area. I think so many entrepreneurs this day and age try to take it on themselves too much to become a better accountant, become a better HR person. No, hire a great HR person, hire a great accountant. Your job is to lead. And so I think a great CEO knows their role, that their job is to empower other people to go kick ass and thrive in places and to surpass the CEO's knowledge. And the CEO leads by example every day by showing up with the right attitude and empowering his people the way that he can, or she can, just being the standard, setting the pace.
I love that so much. I mean, standard, that's what it is. Moral authority. Our mutual mentor from afar, John Maxwell, talks about that a lot.
Yes.
So couldn't agree with you more, my dude. Well, as we wrap today, in the case our audience hasn't connected with you, where can they find you, Galel?
Yeah, they can find me online at galel.com, Galel.com. They can read my articles at earlytorise.com or find me on Instagram or LinkedIn under my name, Galel Fajardo. Would love to connect with everybody.
Dude, man. So to wrap up the show, I just want to thank you first and foremost for taking the time to drive up to our studio, be here. This is just an awesome episode. I'm super fired up. But way more important than that, and we're new friends this past year,
yes.
But dude, I feel a connection. I love your energy. I love your heart. I love your enthusiasm. And what I love about you most, you have this spirit of gratitude. And when someone's grateful like that, good things happen. And I would like to think I'm the same way, kindred spirits. And
yes.
I so much respect that about you. And I want to thank you, acknowledge you for that.
Thank you so much, Bryce. I really appreciate it. I hope this is the first of many episodes we end up doing together, brother. This was a lot of fun. We have a lot of stuff to talk about and really appreciate you and what you're doing to spread this message. I think is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential.
Well, I appreciate that and you, my friend, and more to come. So, friends, I know you got a ton out of this episode, so I would highly encourage you, drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. I would love to continue a healthy dialogue. And remember, adversity is your advantage.